From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, GOP 2015, the 5th debate. Sparks flew in Las Vegas Wednesday as Republican presidential hopefuls held their 5th debate, moderated by CNN's Wolf Blitzer. The primetime debate involved Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, Jeb Bush, Carla Fiorina, Chris Christie, Rand Paul, and John Kasich. The undercard debate involved Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum, Lindsey Graham, and George Pataki. But the real story of the night was the showdown between GOP frontrunners Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Trailing Mr. Cruz in the key caucus state of Iowa, Mr. Trump went on offense. Who was the most aggressive in this debate?
I think Rand Paul was the most aggressive, John. If you talk about somebody, he came out as the libertarian he basically is. He made the real case against Chris Christie, saying this guy's going to lead us into World War III. I think there were other aggressive folks there as well. But you know, John, the key question to come out of this debate is the real division in the Republican Party over the no-fly zone in Syria, which would involve the United States shooting down Syrian planes over Syrian territory and shooting down Russian planes in Syria. And you got the Hawks, Jeb Bush is there, Chris Christie is there, Kasich is there, and one of the others is there. And Trump and Cruz, the front runner, are very much for keeping Assad in power and not letting ISIS get there. So you got a tremendous division in foreign policy in the Republican Party, and it really revealed itself, I think, in what I thought was an excellent, exciting, and sometimes a debate that got out of control.
Well, you have a lot of shades of toughness, and if Rand Paul wasn't there, you really wouldn't have had the dovish side, if you will. I don't think the debate changed the shape of the race, but I think it does clarify where some of the candidates are, and I think it's Donald Trump, and it's Ted Cruz, and it's Rubio who are kind of socking away at each other. But if you ask me who the most aggressive was in the debate, I would say Jeb Bush, because he's the only one who really took it to Trump. And we're so used to Jeb as kind of the gentle giant and kind of losing in the encounters with Trump and sort of backing off. And he got one of the lines that lingered the morning after, which is, you can't insult your way to the presidency, Donald. For a moment, Trump even looked flustered, and we've been commenting here sitting on the set about the facial expressions that Trump has when the camera cuts to him. You know, he looks like someone who is beginning to adjust to the fact that he might not win this thing. And he basically said that he will support the nominee and said he respects them. And so I thought it was a much more congenial evening than anybody anticipated.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things that came out of this certainly is that also Ted Cruz now taking on Marco Rubio. And I think what Cruz's strategy is that he expects ultimately Trump will fall away. I mean, he requires that inherently to some degree. And at that moment that Trump's supporters will gravitate towards Cruz. You know, very noticeable not wanting to challenge Trump and that sort of reciprocity they had, but very aggressively taking on Rubio as the sort of perceived establishment candidate, which is another factor that again suggests that Cruz is trying to buck that trend and get on the sort of Trump horse. But again, you know, I think it's probably too little too late for Jeb Bush, unfortunately for him, because I think it's good to have a civil person in the debate. But you know, Chris Christie, I think one final interesting point is that Chris Christie, I think, was trying to certainly steal some of Jeb's establishment thunder and trying to come in there as the sort of governor alternative to the Rubio senator on the establishment. So as it gets closer, you see the end game strategies materializing, and I think that's why it made it much more of an interesting dynamic debate.
Okay, no-fly zone.
I think if you're in favor of World War III, you have your candidate. If we announce that we're going to have a no-fly zone, and others have said this, Hillary Clinton's also for it, it is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for World War III. We don't need to confront Russia from a point of recklessness that would lead to war.
Who was Rand Paul referring to, and is he right, Clarence?
Well, he was referring to all the advocates of a no-fly zone, including Trump and various others.
Trump's not there. He's referring to Christie. Trump's not for the no-fly
right.
zone.
Right. Good correction,
Right.
Pat. Thank you. Thank you.
Now that you're corrected, you want to answer the question?
Yeah, he's talking about Christie. and Rand Paul is talking about the danger of a no-fly zone, being that it could put us into a direct confrontation with not only the Syrian Air Force, but the Russian Air Force. And there's inherent dangers in that kind of a situation. But you know what's interesting is Rand Paul and Jeb Bush are trying to be the grown-ups in the room at a place that doesn't want any grown-ups. It's really gotten so there's a race to the bottom as far as who can be the most militant, who can be ready to take up arms the quickest and all.
You know,
and that's
Trump
a very
won the
dangerous
debate
position.
for this reason, not because he's the best debater, but one, because he stepped out and said, he was asked, will you support the candidate? And he said, I'm a Republican, and win or lose, I'm going to support the Republican candidate in the fall. Huge round of applause. Secondly, he wins because he did not lose. There was no damage done to him at all. He does have all these facial expressions, which are very human and almost non-political.
And for the first time, he said, forthrightly, I will not run as an independent.
And that caused, I mean, that is
Who
good.
got to him?
I think he got to himself.
No.
Well, that's not the first time.
Reince Priebus got to
Oh,
him.
come on.
No.
Look, the
You
key,
know how persuasive Reince is, huh?
well, yeah, look, but let me tell you, the wise thing to do, and I will say I predicted that Cruz would not go after Trump, and Trump would try not to get in a fight with Cruz. They are 1 and 2. Cruz's strategy of not going after people, he's risen. Obviously, Trump's got to go down, but he doesn't want to be the instrument that brings him down, or he brings himself down.
Yes, but point of clarity, this is not the first time Trump has said that he would support the nominee. He actually signed a pledge, but he's kind of dances away from it. Nobody fully trusts
art of
it.
the deal.
So just pointing that out.
Yeah, if anything, he's unpredictable. I mean, they can't take that to the bank. It was interesting seeing the RNC today trying to be very conciliatory towards Trump. Like, fingers
sure.
crossed, fingers
Look,
crossed.
You've got to have
Christie's,
Trump's people.
Right.
You can't win without Trump's people.
No, you can't.
And you can't win if the regular Republicans
And you-
leave.
Yeah, and you can't win with
Christie's
Trump.
statement gave Rand Paul an opening for one of the best rejoinders of the night. If you're in favor of World War III, you have your candidate. Christie's readiness for brinksmanship with Russia made Trump look like the serious GOP candidate in the race.
John, this
Follow
is
that?
I wouldn't go
but
that
I don't
far.
follow. Yeah, I don't follow him that far as far as looking
Right.
like the serious candidate in the race.
But the
That's-
no-fly zone sounds very appealing on the face of it, but when you examine it, ISIS doesn't have any planes. Russia is over there also fighting ISIS, but with another agenda. And you don't want to kick off World War III by feeling you have to carry through on a
Start
threat.
shooting down Russian
so, I mean,
planes.
Well, what's the
and you have to have
That
ground
is
troops to
insane.
defend it.
Here's what I think the consensus might move now towards the idea of a no-fly zone in western Iraq, with the authority of the Iraqi government, the support of the Iranians and the Russians.
Who's
Under
flying?
that, in
Who's
western
flying?
Iraq,
Who's
and
flying
you
in Western Iraq?
Right.
can- no, everyone.
Good
Well, the
point.
United States is dominant.
Who
there,
else is flying there?
The Iraqis. I mean, the
Well, that's
Iraqis
our
have a
Well,
side.
that's there.
Right. No, I know. But if you but you can have it. What my point is, you can have a safe harbor, right? The no-fly zone is just not. It's not about planes. It's about no planes, so that people on the ground are
Okay,
safe.
hold on. NSA spotlight.
We are now at a time where we need more tools, not less tools. And that tool we lost, the metadata program, was a valuable tool that we no longer have at our disposal.
Question, are we back into security versus privacy? I ask you, Pat.
Yeah, we are. But we are more in terms of how Cruz voted and how.
Yeah, it's deep in the weeds.
And you're deep in the weeds, and and both of them made their positions clear. And Cruz made a mistake, and Rubio made a mistake on immigration. But neither of them would make that mistake again. But in the face-off between the two of them, I thought Rubio was doing exceedingly well early in the debate, but clearly he was under duress. Later it went on, and I think Cruz won the exchange, especially on the immigration and amnesty issue. He kept pounding it again and again and again.
Because Cruz tied Rubio to Senator Schumer and Democrats, and I think this is new information probably for a lot of voters. Not everybody knows what the Gang of Eight was, what this immigration bill was, what his role was. I mean, you hear, okay, he flip-flopped, but so I think Cruz probably drew some blood on that. But why the two of them are going after each other? They're just now giving clear track to Trump.
No. What they want is they're in the same lane. You got to clear one of them out before you get to the main guy.
They might do each other. They might be a suicide pact if the two of them go after each other so aggressively.
But one of them's got to win to get into the finals.
Okay, the WWW.
I wanted to get our brilliant people from Silicon Valley and other places and figure out a way that ISIS cannot do what they're doing. You talk freedom of speech, you talk freedom of anything you want. I don't want them using our internet to take our young, impressionable youth.
Question, why was Trump the only GOP candidate to discuss winning the fight with ISIS by trying to win hearts and minds by denying ISIS its ability to manipulate social media?
I think what Trump is saying is, look, we've got these websites and all these things going on that are going after these impressionable kids and persuading them to go over there and getting them to kill people. Let's use our technology, go in, and if we have to, shut down those websites. It's like shutting down a Nazi newspaper.
Yeah, right.
But right now,
is he going to shut down the First Amendment also?
Well, look, I mean, you're going to let terrorists have free use of the internet?
Excuse me.
Let Eleanor in. Hurry up, Eleanor.
The president has been dealing with this, talking to the heads of all of these sites. Hillary Clinton just announced it. This is not, a new revelation that you have to get the cooperation of the people running these sites. Twitter shuts down these sites all the time, and then they pop up. So there has to be more coordination to see what more can be done. Nobody's disagreeing with that. And also, Carly Fiorina also did have a pretty long statement about how she would tap talent here, and she has a pretty good understanding of the technology beyond all this stuff. This is not a Trump, singular idea.
Yeah. Very, very quickly is that though some of the intelligence community and law enforcement would actually rather those websites stayed online because they can see who's visited them and then track them.
That's right. I mean, all Trump did was once again show he doesn't understand the internet.
Right.
At least he didn't say let's talk to Bill Gates about shutting down the internet like he said before. But it doesn't matter because facts don't matter with Trump. What matters is he's got the right attitude his supporters.
The reason Trump is doing well.
Thank you. That's right. That's
mainstream media. Everything he says is bad.
That's right.
Well,
and so it doesn't matter if Trump's ideas are developed or not. Just the fact that he targets the internet, the media, whatever.
I love the way he refers to it as our internet. It reminds me during the first Gulf War when they used to say, what is our oil doing under their sand?
Well, he thinks that
okay. Muddy the waters.
He was fighting to grant amnesty and not to secure the border. I was fighting to secure the border. I have never supported legalization, and I do not intend to support legalization.
Question, how damaging were Cruz's attacks on Rubio's support for amnesty for illegal aliens?
John, you could see it from Rubio's face. Early on when the exchanges were going on, Rubio was grinning and laughing, going to come back at him. Here you can see from what you just put up there, a little measure of worry on his face about what is being said. As you mentioned, I think Cruz drew blood in the exchange on amnesty and immigration in the Republican Party.
The thing is, Rubio's really gotten a free ride of his so-called flip-flop on this issue, and I think he doesn't know how to handle it because he doesn't want to disqualify himself from being a general election candidate. Right. Because if you're in a general election, we're not all talking about amnesty for illegal aliens. We're talking about let's figure out what we do about immigration reform for people who have been living among us and doing lots of jobs and working for us. It's a very different attitude, and he's trying. It's a balancing act for him.
Twice in this debate, Governor Christie accused President Obama and Hillary Clinton of, quote, betraying the country. Why the harsh tone?
I think,
because he's trying to be Mr. Tough Guy going against Trump.
And he's also trying to usurp some of Jeb Bush's support. He's trying to say, look, I'm the establishment candidate if for whatever reason Marco Rubio implodes because of the amnesty issue. They're jockeying. It's getting to the end time. You have to roll the dice. You have to be aggressive. He wants waves. He wants news. He wants momentum, but I think at this point it becomes very hard.
How is he going to? Wait a minute. How is he going to do in Iowa and New Hampshire?
I think New Hampshire he can do better, but Iowa he's going to really struggle.
Who? Trump?
No, Christie.
Oh, Christie's nowhere in Iowa. He's betting everything on New Hampshire.
Trump. I'm talking about Trump.
Oh, Trump will come in first or second in Iowa, and probably first in New Hampshire as of now. But what Christie is doing, he's going all out in the hawk line, the toughest guy. I'm going to kick scooting around. We're going to, do this to, and I think I believe he went. I was jolted when he said I'm going to shoot down Russian planes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never heard a presidential candidate say something like that.
President Obama a feckless weakling. I mean,
I know.
I was thinking
of escorted him down the beach after
yeah,
a hurricane, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of what kind of words I would use to describe Christie. I'm not going to repeat them here.
Yeah, but how accurate
Go right
have
ahead,
they
Eleanor.
been? Was it below the belt for Hugh Hewitt to ask Ben Carson, quote, just to be clear, you're okay with the deaths of thousands of children in airstrikes against ISIS?
That was silly.
There's
no one's calling. No one's calling for
No
that.
one's calling for that.
We have JDAMs, which are targeted by satellites. We have people on the ground.
These debates are a test of how well you answer the question.
But that's an offensive.
And I think on foreign affairs in general.
Thought out there that I think for which there was no justification. Now, if you went after Cruz, who said we're going to make the sand glow, say, what do you have in mind? Right. How do you make the sand glow other than with atomic weapons?
Right.
Right.
Well, it's the carpet bombing. I mean, Cruz is saying we should carpet bomb, and there are people. These are cities. You can't selectively carpet bomb. And I think Carson has signed on to that. So it was a crudely worded question.
And there's an image that came out yesterday, actually, of two young Syrian children and it had been set up by an NGO, but they were on a desolate street that had been blown apart. Their parents had been killed by a Russian bomb. That is not the United States. The United States prides itself on being the most capable military force, but also just it was before. Okay, Second World War, but it's not.
If you take a look at Dresden.
Hello.
Yeah.
Exit question. After the Las Vegas debate, is Trump still the GOP front runner? Yes or no?
He is, and I think Cruz is probably still second.
Well, he's the front runner nationally, but he's second in Iowa. But picky. I would refer to him as the Republican front runner, and I think that's how Hillary should refer to him. Don't use his name; just say the Republican front runner. Everybody knows who she means.
He is the front runner, but I think ultimately it's going to come down to Rubio versus Cruz.
Yeah, he's still a front runner, but it's also, this is a new phase of the campaign we're moving into now. Voters are starting to get engaged. Iowa is, 7 weeks away. We're in a situation now where people are starting to take things seriously and starting to learn information they didn't know before. And we saw that Trump, once again, was not as astute about international relations and defense issues as Cruz and some others. So Pat's right. It's the people who are the potential second placers who are potentially moving up into first on the basis of this debate.
Yeah. Are you inclined to read polls?
Am I inclined to read polls? Yeah, I wake up with them every day. I go right to Realpolitik, and that's how I get my eyes open.
Doesn't it come into play when you evaluate the question that's been thrown out to the group here?
Yeah, well, Trump is 20, 23, 24 points ahead, even in respected polls. It's going to be very, very tough, I think, even if let's suppose somebody beat him in New Hampshire and he got beaten in Iowa, he still is extremely strong,
But he has fallen behind Cruz in Iowa by the Des Moines Register.
And Cruz will get a bump. Cruz will get a bump going into New Hampshire, but that's going to wipe out other folks. Maybe Christie, probably Bush. I think it looks now to me like it goes down to almost a two-man race unless Rubio can break in there.
Here's what Trump said: I don't want them using our internet to take our young, impressionable youth. Have you thought of that, Pat?
Yeah, I think it's a point. Look, he is not deeply schooled in the internet as is Carly Fiorina and the rest of it, but the fundamental point comes across. We all understand it. If people are using this to convince young, impressionable people to go over into Syria and then come back and kill us, let's take a good look at that thing and shut down the enemy websites.
Which we do, but then they open up a different site very quickly.
So you hear that? You hear that? He's right on the money here. He's right on the money.
They
open up another site.
Well, you shut those down too.
Right.
No,
it's a constant cat and mouse
game. You can't keep up with it.
Right, what do you get? Do you give up?
Can you keep up with it?
No.
What are you supposed to give up? That's the problem.
Nobody's giving up. Nobody's giving up, but one side is pretending like nothing is being done because of the feckless weakling in the White House, when in fact a lot of this is being done.
Issue 2, adios, socialism.
Looking at these results, we are here with morals and ethics, he says, to recognize these adverse results, to accept them, and to tell our Venezuela that our constitution and democracy have triumphed.
Recent legislative elections in Venezuela deserve analysis here at home. A conservative moderate alliance won at least 110 seats in the National Assembly, twice as many as the socialists, and will exert major influence on policy. Its key aims are releasing political prisoners, reducing Venezuela's 100% plus inflation rate, and addressing massive goods shortages. Still, the election is a clear rebuff to the so-called Chavismo policy of President Nicolas Maduro, instigated by flamboyant former President Hugo Chavez, who died of cancer in 2013. President Maduro has used Venezuela's immense oil wealth for redistribution and government patronage. But in recent years, low oil prices have stripped the government of revenue. But this isn't the only recent victory for South American conservatives. Last week, Argentina voted to elect a former banker, Mauricio Macri, to replace left-wing populist president Cristina Kirchner. Is South American socialism dead and buried? How about you, Clarence?
Well, I would say no. It's certainly been knocked back on its heels right now, but there's an old saying that Latin American politics are an argument between elites over how to treat the poor. And they constantly swing left and right historically. And right now it's hard times for socialism. With Venezuela, of course, the collapsing oil prices are the big reason why that government is in trouble. And they were too reliant on oil in the first place, along with too much corruption in the government. So there's a backlash, and there's similar kind of a backlash in Argentina against the right at this juncture, but the left can come back later.
The challenge here is that, you see here that this is the rawest element of socialism in terms of kleptocracy, in terms of, Chavez crazy, Maduro continuing on, corruption, lack of toilet paper, lack of medical supplies, great reporting from Venezuela, lack of basic goods, toiletries, people queuing for hours, and it has utterly failed, and that there's the repudiation now that we see.
Issue 3, counterfeiting in China. On paper, Flaming Lee was a China-based female investigator for a Swiss technology company titled ABB, Asia Brown Boveri. Miss Lee's role was to prevent Chinese criminals from counterfeiting ABB's circuit breakers. Unfortunately for ABB, Flaming Lee was actually a double agent who was selling counterfeit circuit breakers herself. Lee's story is just one example of China's growing counterfeiting industry. This week, the Associated Press reported that China-based counterfeiting has become an industry and is now counterfeiting Western products, including, quote, auto parts, pharmaceuticals, personal care products, and electrical components, unquote. And like Miss Lee, many anti-counterfeiting investigators are corrupt, then falsify reports of raids and seizures to placate their Western bosses. And in China, protected by vested criminal interests, many counterfeiters remain beyond the reach of the law. This reality was discovered the hard way by ABB when it was fined by Chinese authorities for pursuing legal remedies in court. Question, should we fear Chinese exports, Tom?
Well, look, China has a problem in the sense they're being undercut by nations like Vietnam with wage costs. But China, this is the great challenge, I think, and I think it reflects why China will not ultimately overtake the United States, is because of things on the rule of law, of reliability of products. Now, as China gets into the more developed economy state with those internal pressures, people will simply stop buying Chinese products.
This reflects, John, the stupidity of the Republican Party, which is responsible for MFN, opening up China, all these trade deals. They are dumping this garbage counterfeit in the United States because, as Ronald Reagan said, they are communists and they reserve to themselves the right to lie, cheat, and steal. That's who you're dealing with. It's not a partner like Canada or Great Britain.
What about
Well, I
this
don't
is not
think.
something new.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Corruption in China is not something new, and products that are faulty coming over here, whether they're toys or infant formula or whatever it is. Actually, we've sent some infant formula over there that's had a problem. And pharmaceuticals, they can manufacture them much cheaper, and the argument in this country is you can't trust them, and I think that's probably correct. But in the new trade deal, the TPP, one of the president's arguments for that is you got to write some rules of the road, or China, really is rampant with this kind of behavior.
You've got something to enforce as long as you've got rules. If you don't have rules, then you just have chaos. But the fact is that the Chinese have been developing fantastic above-ground and underground economies at the same time for decades, ever since the declaration that capitalism is glorious back in around 1980.
Let's talk about nuclear power plants, all right?
Okay. One of my favorite topics.
China has counterfeited parts used in American nuclear power plants. They've been discovered by inspectors in the U.S. And they inspect nuclear power plants, obviously. Fortunately, none have yet caused a reactor problem.
Well, isn't that fortunate?
3 Mile Island might make you look a second time at MFM.
Yeah, also, maybe they do a very good job of manufacturing these parts, but you have to, bring it out in the open and have it inspected. In that clip that you had, they referred to they answer to their Western bosses. So is this controlled out of the U.S.?
I think what the issue is that there are Western companies that are relying upon Chinese agents to try and make sure counterfeiting doesn't happen. But then
I see.
Counterfeit heparin sold in the U.S. caused 350 hospitalizations with severe damage to patients, including 81 deaths worldwide. Chinese counterfeiters fake the ingredients in many supplements as well as prescription medications.
Well, we need to ask, why do people go overseas for prescriptions in the first place? But part of this has to do with the high medical costs here. But there are ways of enforcing that, just like any other pharmaceuticals, or folks who go up to Canada
one of
to
them
buy
is to sue
drugs.
the producers till you put them out of business.
Actually, should Chinese imports be temporarily banned until China puts in place effective anti-counterfeiting and safety rules? Yes or no?
John Trump's going to deal with this problem.
I was going to say no. That's a Trumpian proposal.
Out of time. Bye-bye.